the beginning of chapter 8, Krakauer looks at these at public reaction to the article he wrote in Outside Magazine, which he expanded into this book. Um, and I wonder, I'd like to talk about how, or I'd like you to consider how you react to um, Chris McCandless, and whether the antagonism expressed here, even anger, um, is what that's about, and try to understand it, and ask whether it's warranted. Um, so here's what Krakauer writes. When McCandless turned up dead in Alaska and the perplexing circumstances of his demise were reported in the news media, many people concluded that the boy must have been mentally disturbed. Um, well, that's interesting. I mean, I I think the question of the relationship between mental illness and um, art and heroism, um, you know, saints, um, the figures in society who, accomplish it, who do extreme things, whether for good or ill, um, are um, touchstones of our history and our culture in one way or another, or they have been in terms of, like I mentioned, saints, kind of extreme behavior, as we were talking about earlier, the pioneers, people who colonize and explore and colonize the frontier, um, are integral part of our history. So it, um, um, ostracizing them as mentally ill, I think, is a modern attitude in a way. I think it in the past. Um, th- what's modern about it is the categorical pathologizing. Um, t- Treating, to say somebody's behavior is a result of mental illness is to say that it's doesn't matter that it's not intentional behavior, that it's more like animal behavior. It's just kind of reacting, or not even healthy animal behavior. It's just um, mis misfiring of the mechanism of the brain in a random accident that doesn't warrant attention. But I think in the past that before the advent of science and scientific medicine, um, the behavior of people that we today might call mentally ill um, was considered in terms of its like prophetic value, what sort of omens or portents, what sort of clues it might offer to the secrets of the universe. Like I was talking about animals last time, um, as promising a kind of message about the mysteries of life. Um, uh, so I'm just inviting you to consider what it means when we say that somebody's mentally ill, what the implications are for how we pay attention to them or don't pay attention to them. It seems to me that it's a way of disregarding um, what we don't understand. It's sort of like, people say animals don't feel pain, or, you know, th- they used to say that about children, or like women giving birth, or racial minorities. They don't feel pain the same way. Um, it's just a way of putting into a different category and not paying attention. Um, so that um, so um, I wonder. Just inviting you to think about that categorization and that various categorize the ways in which McCandless is um, what it means to call him mentally ill or crazy or a kook. Um, I wonder if that's kind of a defensive way of not looking and grappling with the questions he's posing. Not to say those questions should be answered one way or another, um, but just to say, maybe they weren't paying attention to, maybe, his extreme behavior, like a lot of extreme behavior, for better or ill, is responding to currents in the culture. And although an outlier, geniuses, artists are usually outliers. I think on the spectrum of uh, kind of normative versus exceptional behavior, maybe there isn't that much difference between people at the poles. Whether it's like genius behavior that we value very highly, or transgressive behavior that we demonize. Um, so let's see. He says the article about McCandless and Outside generated a large volume of mail. Not a few of the letters heaped opprobrium on McCandless, and on me as well, the author of the story, for glorifying what some thought is foolish, pointless death. Much of the mail was sent by Alaskans. Alex is a nut in my book. The author describes a man who has given away a small fortune, forsaken a loving family, abandoned his car, watch, and map, and burned the last of his money before traipsing off into the wilderness. Personally, I see nothing positive at all about Chris McCandless's lifestyle or wilderness doctrine. Entering the wilderness purposely ill-prepared, surviving a near-death experience does not make you a better human. It makes you damn lucky. Krakauer is a kook if he doesn't think Chris Alexander Supertramp McCandless was a kook. McCandless had already gone over the edge and just happened to hit bottom in Alaska. I'm not here to, answer the question of Chris McCandless, mental health. But I wonder if there is a tension or contradiction between the characterization of him as mentally ill and the hostility and anger towards him. I mean, isn't that, doesn't such hostility imply, that he had a choice, that, he has something to be blamed for, rather than just being mentally ill? But this characterization on the one hand as crazy, but then on the other hand as reprehensible. I'd just like to ask you what you think that's about. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong, but I'm saying I don't understand it. And I do wonder whether it might conceal a kind of defensiveness, that anger responds not to McCandless himself, but to a recognition of, part of his appeal, part of what's actually legitimate about him that these writers are failing to recognize. In other words, it's so the, a term from psychology or literary criticism, overdetermined. When somebody's judgment is overdetermined, it means that there's more than one contradictory reason for it. It's like they're looking for reasons to confirm their judgment rather than building their judgment on their reasons. So that's what I'm curious about. This longer letter, Krakauer concludes with, over the last 15 years, I've run into several McCandless types out in the country. Same story, idealistic, energetic young guys who overestimated themselves, underestimated the country, and ended up in trouble. So one question I have is just, is this? I mean, this is just, something central to frontier culture. The scenario of idealistic young people going out into the world. It doesn't even have to be into the wilderness, just out into life, into the, wilderness of adulthood. Winding up in trouble, learning from experience. But it seems to me that spirit of adventure is something that our culture celebrates. McCandless was hardly unique. There's quite a few of these guys hanging around. They're almost like a collective niche. The only difference is that McCandless ended up dead with the story of his dumbassedness splashed across the media. He commits big-time hubris. Hubris, dumbassedness, and then media overexposure. I wonder if that's, part of it too, is a certain kind of, just the same kind of envy that we have for celebrities in general, or like resentment. We take people to task so quickly for being in the media, or because they're in the media, we're so quick to find faults. Because I think there's this assumption, well, if you're getting all this attention, that you're subject to this ultra close scrutiny, and maybe jealousy, envy. His ignorance would have been cured by a map and a Boy Scout manual is what killed him. While I feel for his parents, I have no sympathy for him. Such willful ignorance amount to disrespect for the land, and paradoxically demonstrates the same sort of arrogance that resulted in the Exxon Valdez oil spill. Just another case of underprepared, overconfident men bumbling around out there and screwing up because they lacked the requisite humility. It's all a matter of degree. Contrived aestheticism, compound rather than reduce the faults. His journals read like the work of above average, somewhat histrionic high school kid, or am I missing something? Okay, so these are some interesting points. He's displaying kind of arrogance. Hubris, overconfidence, and is wasteful. He's disrespecting life in the same way the Exxon Valdez, which causes huge environmental disaster, is disrespecting life. And therefore, his romanticizing self-characterization, as this romantic hero, or frontiersman, um, only compounds the faults, rather than his high-minded ideals only make his arrogance worse, because they dress it up in idealistic rationalizations. So, as we consider these hostile reactions to Chris McCandless, um, whether they're justified or not, I think it's important to recall that we live in a fiercely individualistic culture, a culture in which a tremendous energy and um, you know productivity and time are devoted to individuating oneself through what we buy, through what we accomplish, and how we represent ourselves and communicate ourselves in social media, among other things. Um, and that's just to say that what it means to be exceptional is a really important concern in our culture. It seems like to me, um, be doing exceptional things that warrant, documentation, showing who you are, individuating yourself. It just seems like that's a central concern um, of Western consumer culture. Um, and I don't know, maybe consumer culture in general. It just seems like this need for new um, is the new stuff is has to do with this just hunger for distinction. Um, uh, so the question is, I think, how we mediate that, how we celebrate it, what it means to be an individual, and I think the concern expressed by the letter writer about damage, about human hubris, overconfidence, damage to the environment, not respecting life, is seems like a serious concern, a concern to take seriously. Um, and as I discussed before, looking at this ad, it's on the one hand, I feel like this ad really uh, captures, so to speak, the a cultural obsession with sort of finding ourselves in the spontaneous moment, finding our relationships through, getting ourselves documented in, in social media, um, and on the other hand, disregarding the waste, the damage that entails, the damage entailed by the factory work that produces this, all this technology, the damage entailed just by the whole range of practices that go into our consumer lifestyle. Um, these are adamantly, fiercely suppressed in this ad, in the same way, this uh, counterpart to the designed by Apple in California Lego, legend is the counterpart legend is assembled in China. That actual assembly, I think the suppression of that is analogous to the suppression of the real life that is entailed by chasing this dream, by chasing this consumer fantasy or cultural fantasy of the exceptional moment, the realizing myself spontaneously in this moment that's uh, secured by photographs and other sorts of self-representation in social media. What's the actual cost in terms of the what the letter writer expressed concern about, the letter writer to John Krakauer, the natural environment and society. I suggested in this ad that there's sort of a racist element, to this celebration of, implicitly white, individualistic, creative Californian culture, and the suppression of impersonal industrial assembly work that's associated with Asia in general and China in particular. I mentioned the idea that what we consider mental illness in the post-Enlightenment kind of medicalized world of modernity might, in a pre-modern context, be viewed in terms of like signs from divine communication. Not necessarily messages from God. It could also be messages from the devil. And that is problematic, needless to say, in lots of ways. The so again, I'm not bashing rationality. The interpreting the signs of the gods through often was just like self-fulfilling prophecy, that they accuse somebody of witchcraft and then throw them in the river to see if they're a witch or not, and if they drown, that shows that they're a witch. So that a lot of what passed in the pre-modern world for recognizing signs or communications from nature or from gods was not just a way of enforcing authority. But I guess I'm, want to raise a similar question about the way in which we talk about mental illness, if it's a way of just reinforcing kind of social authorities, medicalization of people, control. It's just a thought to bear in mind. So here are some thoughts from Emerson and Thoreau. The American transcendentalists, sort of the originators, I think, of the what was being complained about in that letter is the histrionic high school justification or celebration, literary celebration of Chris McCandless' behavior. I think a lot of it comes back to the American transcendentalists. And ironic and interesting to point out here is that Chris saw himself as motivated by humility. So he's being taken to task for arrogance. But that's something Chris McCandless himself was very concerned about, was the arrogance of society, the kind of complacency of society, and feeling of a kind of responsibility or duty to test himself in an honest way. As Thoreau puts it, rather than love, than money, than fame, give me truth. He's also, I think, Chris McCandless, searching for an honest criterion of value, make a explicit argument about what it is about life that needs to be protected. This kind of goes back to the thing about the kids thing in the Paris terror attack aftermath, about the flowers versus guns. It sort of just evades the issue to act as if the criteria are obvious. I think that's sort of just the argument of like, yeah, guns. Everybody needs guns because because people have guns or whatever. You need guns to protect yourself from guns. So again, I wonder if these sort of categorical. It's easy enough. There's, I think. No question that Chris McCandless was reckless, but the question is, whether that was in service of a valuable or worthwhile purpose, and because I just don't think it's being honest if we just assume that recklessness is bad in general. I think our culture rewards risk-taking, and just playing it safe is boring, if not cowardly. And it seems to me that social media, this whole social media dimension of our world that didn't even exist at Chris McCandless's time, has only increased our appetite for sensational adventure.